Welcome to the Clemson Dubcast. It is Monday, June 3rd, and as of 10:07 a.m. as we record this, Paul Strelo's Monday Morning Recruiting Insider, already 3 pages in on our message board, 4,000 views, 94 replies. TigerIllustrated.com, the place to be for all the recruiting scoop and insight. And we're offering a free membership from now until the start of August camp. That is hard to beat. Go to TigerIllustrated.com to learn more. My good friends Blake Smith and Brooke Archenhold have been part of the podcast since the beginning, way back in August of 2018. They have an accomplished team of personal injury attorneys at Parham, Smith, and Archenhold based in Greenville. They are Clemson people, and their skillful attorneys have decades of experience in complicated litigation matters, taking a special interest in medical malpractice, nursing home abuse, and neglect, car accident cases that have left the individuals involved in serious trouble. For a free consultation at Parham, Smith, and Archenhold, call 864-990-4581 or online at parhamlaw.com. That's PARHAM law.com. When you're ready for a complete renovation in your home or business, open the door to more with Harris Home and Harris Commercial. Their local experienced team will totally transform any room space, from beautiful floor coverings to construction to finished details. Harris handles every step of your renovation process, whether it's a kitchen or living room or an industrial or educational setting, like some of the positively stunning work they've done at Clemson University. Go to discoverharris.com and experience a total renovation transformation from Harris Home and Harris Commercial. Solero Communications, formerly known as Tandem Payment, is a full-service integrated electronic payments provider powered by leading-edge technology. Solero provides a wide array of merchant solutions, simplified payments. They make onboarding, taking payments, maintaining risk management and compliance, and getting support quick and easy. At Solero, they're all about helping you achieve sustainable growth as a business. Taking payments isn't the only thing your business needs. With Solero's solutions, you can manage inventory, sell products and services via social media, schedule staff, track sales, get reports, and much, much more. Find out more about Solero at solerocommerce.com. That's CELERO commerce.com. Okay, as promised, our second part of our long sit-down with former Clemson offensive line coach and Clemson alum, Thomas Austin. Part 1 got a lot of rave reviews, and I don't think this will be any different. Hope you all enjoy. Something Dabo always rails on in recent years is on this big, huge, unsolvable topic is how come you never hear anybody talk about the education as part of that conversation? There's so much cynicism just in general nowadays, and I think that as folks like media talking heads or whoever, the prominent voices in that conversation, as they're talking about all these changes, you don't ever hear about that. And I'm sure, there's probably some justification to that in that, maybe, you have an army of tutors and all this other stuff, making sure they're going to class and what does it really mean? But man, I've been here for 20 years and I have met and I know a lot of the people who have gone through the Paul journey and gotten their degrees, and I know how much they treasure those degrees and what they meant for their lives, and so I've always just pushed back on that. Not that there aren't exceptions, but the value of a degree is still tremendous, and particularly to the point of such a small fraction of these players are actually going to have a chance to even go to the NFL.
Right. Yeah, so, well, and that's, I think we're lying to these kids if we're just talking about the NFL. Right, 1.8% or 1.9% are going to make it the NFL, and those who do, the average career is 3.3 years. And so the number of guys that make it to the NFL and make enough money long enough to never work again, I don't know what that percentage is, but it's very, very, very small. Your kids are, how old is your oldest now?
Going into senior year and going into sophomore year.
So you're looking at colleges, right? Yeah. And so, without getting into your financial business, but if you got to take out a student loan to send a kid to college, you realize really quickly the value of college. And it's a big debate going on before the election in November, right? Is how much crippling debt a lot of people have to get degrees. Now I think where education has, I think, got off the rails a little bit, right, is there are degrees out there that, you probably don't need to go to college to get, and they're not going to pay back what you paid for it. but you look at the value of an engineering degree at Clemson. I mean, some of those things that are worth it. So, I mean, I had teammates who were first time college graduates in their family. I coached players at Georgia State and Clemson who would be the first graduate in their family. Like, that's a big deal. And I think part of that, Coach Sweeney beats that drum because he was the first college graduate in his family. And so he knows the value of the education. It's changed the trajectory of his life because it's not just what you learn in college, right? We know that. I mean, there's some things you learn that you don't forget, but it's the networking, the social capital, the people that you meet that end up becoming coworkers or bosses and those things. And so I had an opportunity to come back and GA at Clemson because of the way I handled myself as a player. And so, those are opportunities. So yeah, I think it's a big point that people are missing. And I get some people are getting cynical and that's, I don't know how they're going to work through those details. Like, just get rid of college altogether. Like, that's, and part of it, football doesn't have a minor league. I mean, I think some of the leagues now, the USFL is kind of helping. But, every year we would, Clemson would submit, draft papers for different kids. Kids want to leave early, and if you got a first-round grade back, and I mean, at that time, and it's been a couple years since I heard the statistic, but it used to be a couple years ago that the average first-round contract was $12.5 million, and the average second-round contract was $2.5 million. And so that's a $10 million difference. So if you're a projected second-rounder and coming back to Clemson could help you become, it's a $10 million investment on average. Could be more than that if you become a top 5 or 10. And so the NFL, used to give like draft, round grades, and kids would leave early and go undrafted. You still see it, And now they've kind of said like first round, second round, like, maybe third round, like go back to school. Because the NFL also knows that it's a problem if their young talent comes out too early before they're ready and doesn't, because if you go undrafted or you go late, the chance of you having a successful NFL career are much lower than if you're a top pick. And so they know that some of those kids need another year of development. And so they're like encouraging kids to stay in school and finish, and I know every sport's different. Baseball has their model, basketball has their model, and so yeah, they've got to work through, some of those details. But again, like you said, I mean, the value of the education is something that's not being talked about. And if we still believe that that's important to college athletics, then that needs to be something that's incentivized, not de-incentivized. And I think you're going to see less and less kids graduate, unfortunately.
We've been talking for about an hour, and I still haven't asked you, what does the future hold for you? Do you have an interest in staying in coaching?
Yes, that's the $1 million question. We're wide open, man. I mean, we, as a Christian, my kind of way I'm trying to make decisions is I want to be faithful to God's call on my life, and if that means to move to Alaska and coach football, I will. I love coaching football. It's an unbelievable game, but the business right now is a little bit crazy. But the second thing is I want to do what's best for my family, and I think, one of the things that I'm concerned about is just my son's going in the 7th grade, and the reality is that I'll have to continue to move him around to stay in college athletics, and so that's the only concern there. And so, and then again, I mean, I think I've been very fortunate to work for great men. I mean, Coach Sweet's a good man, Sean Ellis a good man. Like, who you work for really matters, and so I've always kind of been not going to take a job just to take a job, or but to work for the right kind of people, And in the meantime, we're here in Clemson, and I'm enjoying being dad. I'm enjoying being involved in our church. I'm enjoying, having the time that you mentioned that I don't have. I think those guys are probably in between maybe practice 1 and 2 youth camp right now, or coach is probably about to get it wrapped up as we sit here on Thursday. There's things you certainly miss about it, and there's things that you're like, I'm not at youth camp right now, So yeah, we're just trying to be prayerfully consider what's next and be obedient to that, and in the meantime maximize the time I have with the family. And I'm fighting the as a coach, the restlessness, like wanting to work, prove myself, wanting to be busy, that, hey, I'm in a season of life. It's just a season of life where, like, I have more time with my family, and I want to take advantage of that, and not feel guilty that I'm picking my kids up from school at 3:00. And so fighting that because that is a little bit of a battle for me. Just the way I'm wired.
How many times a day in the last 5 months have you looked at your watch and gone, yeah, I'd be doing this right about now?
Yeah, there's been, I think it's kind of different times of the year of like, okay, they're getting, like I remember the night before, like, all right, they're about to start match drills. Like that 4:30 wake up call, texted, hey guys, good luck tomorrow, and then like, signing day was weird and seeing, like it's funny, you had Otis Pickett on the podcast, Otis has become a friend of mine, and I've gone to his office and been meeting with him and doing like a blue book study on the Constitution. It's been really great. Yeah, it's great. It's been really interesting. Well, his office is on campus, and so, I left and I turn around and I bump into some of the players, some of the freshmen, some of the recruits, like, Coach, what they're like, it was in January, February, because I had like a beanie on and a jacket. They're like doing a double take, and I've tried to kind of, especially with the linemen, I've talked to Putnam and some of those older, but I've tried to kind of give the younger guys, especially those guys I was recruiting, kind of give them space, let them develop a relationship with Matt and Luke and the rest of the staff. And so I've tried to be kind of hands off and not, muddy the waters. And also, I've got to be careful, if you take a job in December, you don't want to be accused of tampering. And that's the part that's kind of sad, is like I remember coming to Clemson, some of my former players would reach out about advice, and I couldn't respond to them because of, I didn't want to, that kid hit the portal and he was a kid we ended up looking at. I didn't want to be, in charge for tampering. And so, that relational part has been tough because you're just, you build a relationship with these kids and then you're just out of it, and you got to give space to the next guy to do his thing. And so that's part of living in a small town, like I remember, when I first bumped into you in December, I was taking my son to get a haircut, and then I bumped into you, so we talked for a little bit. And so part of that's gotten easier over time. I mean, and I took my son to a basketball game because Margaret and I were very adamant about this, of like, hey, this is our university. We both graduated from here, and I'm not going to go into hiding. I'm not a leper. I'm not going to just, live in my basement. We're going to live our lives, and we're going to be involved in our community. And sometimes it makes it awkward, and sometimes, but again, I think it's a learning opportunity for our kids. So, and my, oldest, he's 12. He was on the sidelines. He's still processing, kind of, he's pulling for baseball right now, and he loves Clemson Athletics, but it's like it's still the football side of it's complicated for him, and then, the other ones are, we'll sit them down, like, hey, we got to talk to you guys, and we'll be, like, oh gosh, are we about to move? Like, no, we're going to the lake this weekend. Like stuff like that. So the little kids are constantly just kind of, I think, especially early on, where every time we sat down, they're like, okay, is this the time when Dad's going to tell us we're leaving all of our friends? So that's the human element that I think sometimes gets, it's not just about, certainly not about me. It's about my wife, my family, my kids, and so it affects a lot of people. But that's part of the business. And so the other thing I think has been good, we've learned from it, is, when someone gets fired or someone loses something happens, I think it's always good to reach out to them and text them. Yeah. And even, we saw some people knew exactly what to say. And then some people you didn't hear from because they didn't know what to say, or like, hey, we want to give you space, and I think just acknowledging, hey, we know you're going through a hard time. We're here for you if you need anything. Or just, we had people drop off a meal. I had someone drop me off some bourbon, which was great.
Oh,
I used that pretty quick. No, but, and so I think that's the part that, at the end of the day, you're dealing with people, you're dealing with families, and from coaches to players. And I think that's one thing, when you see people smearing players, like, as coaches, I'm like, listen, we signed up for this. We're highly compensated for what we're doing. But when you have people attacking 18 or 19-year-olds and death threats and some of that stuff, you're like, man, we're losing sight of what this is really all about, And so I think that's my kind of charge, for anyone, fans of just, and you see it in rec sports, sports is sports. Let's not make it an idol and make it the most important thing in our lives. And Because it's a great game. All of them can be great games, but it can also be a tool that causes a lot of pain and suffering for people if it's handled the wrong way.
What was the Gator Bowl like? How did y'all choose to?
Yeah.
Did y'all watch it? Like, what?
Yeah. No, So we were in New Jersey, visiting my sister, and the game was at noon maybe, or was it?
It was at noon. Yeah.
Well, I've got a picture I'll show you. I sent it to a friend of mine. It was definitely on our mind, and I think my wife and I were both a little angsty, and our 12-year-old was a little angsty about it. Of like the game's about to go on. So we were saying, hey, we'll record it and then just kind of start it, late. Because I anticipated them talking about coaching changes and all that, and the kids didn't want to listen to that. Yeah. So my oldest son and I watched it. With my sister and her kids, and when it was so I sent this to a friend of mine. I was canoeing on a little lake with a very, very small life jacket, and I was like, "This is what I'm doing at kickoff," And he's like, "You need to save that picture because it could be something you look back at that you don't stop being a dad, you don't stop, kind of living your life." And so, it was the same, we took the kids to get ice cream and we had fun. And then watching the game, was bittersweet because you're still invested and you still love the kids. You want them to do well. And, I think my 12-year-old said it, like he kind of got up and everyone was cheering at the end because of the way it ended. And he kind of left and just said, I just feel like my brain's in a blender right now. I don't know. I want to pull for them, but I don't know how to feel, Yeah. And so it's not just coaching football, it's coaching somewhere you've been, and you got guys on the staff that were teammates and guys that were roommates and in guys' weddings, and so it's complex and complicated. And so I think we're still trying to. We talked last night actually, about, hey buddy, you want to watch the Clemson Georgia game? Do you want to watch it here? Do you want to go with some people? And he's like, I don't know, Dad. I don't know how I feel about it. He's on a group text with friends that are like, hey, who's going to Dabo Swinney football camp?
Wow. Yeah.
And he's like, well, I'm not, Yeah. And so those are the things that you don't have to. Not many people get the opportunity to have this conversation with a 12-year-old. That we're getting an opportunity to teach them, some life lessons. And I thought it was great. We had some friends reach out to us and say, hey, I just want y'all to know, like, our son's going to go to football camp. Is that okay with you? And we're like, yeah, like y'all live your life. And that was my son's response. I was like, yeah, he should go. Like he shouldn't go just because I'm not going, And so like you're seeing growth in him. And I think time heals a lot of wounds if they're not just. I think time heals all wounds is a little bit of a false statement if you're not dealing with what they are, But you got to deal with it, and I think we're trying to deal with it, and then I've been, the Sunday after I got fired, we're at church, and people come to us, I can't believe you guys are here. Like, well, why would we not be here? This is where we need to be. And I had an elder from our church come up to me and encourage me and love on me. And this man's son, unfortunately committed suicide a couple years ago, and I was just struck with, man, I'm worried about my circumstances, and this man has undergone. Pain and hurt that I don't even want to begin to express. Yeah. And so I think, we're trying to tell our kids to be mindful of the fact that, man, we're very blessed to be where we are. We're healthy. Everyone's fine. That this is not going to be the worst thing that ever happens to them. Hopefully it is. But, like life is hard and loss happens, divorce and death and all kinds of things happen that, football is just a small piece of that.
Yeah, gratitude is harder to teach kids when they really don't experience any real trauma.
Yeah, especially in this day and age, right, where it's just kind of I want it now, want it now, want it now, and teaching kids how to earn it and teaching kids how to be grateful for it and not be I think this is helping our kids learn not to be selfish and view everything through the lens of what's best for me, what's easy for me, and so. Yeah, this is trying to teach them some grit, and it's just part of that process.
I think it's self-evident over the last hour what you miss the least about coaching. What do you miss the most?
Yeah, being in the locker room, being with those guys. Love the season, the grind of preparing each week, but it's the relationships. I think I said someone earlier when you let go, it feels a little bit like an amputation, of just like you're no longer a part of, those aren't our players anymore, That's not my office anymore, The picture on the rock is taken down. My fingerprint doesn't work anymore.
Wow,
so
yeah.
you're in something and now you're not. So I think, but it's not, just you like if you asked me some of the scores of the games this fall, I couldn't tell you, but I can tell you a funny story that someone told on a Tuesday night at 10 o'clock when you're game planning. Those are the things. And then the time with the players. I mean, I was coaching football to try to make an impact in the lives of young men, and so we had a great group of kids. We had a great group of kids that worked hard, man, and wanted to be great. And so just the interactions with those guys and helping them and seeing the transformation that happens over the course of, a couple years, a kid gets there and then where they end up as they leave Clemson is awesome to be a small part of that. So the relationships is the part you miss the most.
The part from the outside looking in that I really sort of am sympathetic to of coaches is the almost microscopic amount of time they actually get to enjoy success. And I remember talking to Dustin Fry about this. He's, of course, he's coaching high school ball now. Of course, a lot different than college ball, but he was saying that when he was at Arkansas and SMU, that like, okay, you win a game, even if you win a game, if it's a 3:30 game or a night game, you get to enjoy it for a couple hours maybe until you wake up the next morning, go to church maybe, but then it's that's flushed, and then even if you win a game, if your position group didn't play well, then you're like kind of uneasy, even when you're supposed to be savoring it.
And as an offensive line coach, like there's always stuff. There's 5 guys.
Yes.
I mean, so you could have 4 guys have great grades and 1 guy not, or you have a guy that you have 80 plays and 78 of them were great, and he gave up a sack and a quarterback pressure, and one of those was a strip fumble going the other way or something like that. I mean, catastrophic. You never felt great about a game. I mean, just because there's always something to improve on. And so I think that was the tightrope you try to balance the. And that's why it can't just be about the result. On Saturdays. I mean, that's what you're evaluated for the most, but it's that process. And trying to measure. How do you measure success? Is it just wins and losses, or is it the growth of your players personally, spiritually, and then as players, are they getting better over time? And are they better, game 8, game 9, game 10 they were game 1, and so, I think that's the part that, you don't. I mean, and every day we would start off with a graphic with the windshield mentality that it's all about what's next. And so you have to flip the page quickly. You don't have time to sit on your laurels if you did well, and if your group sucked that week, like you got to deal with you got to fix the issues and move on, and so it's a little bit of a double-edged sword. So I think that's where, my encouragement to coaches has always been don't enjoy the process and savor the moment, and don't let the pressure of the job or the performance kind of rob you of your joy, and your why. I think keeping that mentality is easier said than done at times.
Has there ever been a more difficult week in the football building or any football building you've been in than the one after the NC State game leading up to the Notre Dame game?
I don't think there was. That was old. That was a tough week, man. Old Tyler from Spartanburg. I don't even know who he is. No, that was a rough week. And that was probably one of the most fun games I've ever been a part of, and just what it meant to everybody. And to have, we were down basically 3 starters up front, to have, Colin was out and Marcus tore his MCL on a Tuesday practice. Walker was out. Mitchell Mays was struggling really, and so, man, we had 2 new starters at guard, a freshman with Harris and Trent Howard, a more experienced guy, and just to run the football up down the field on him was awesome, and so, it's the end result was great, but the news isn't good unless there's bad news, right? If someone calls you and says, "Hey, we're okay," well, we are in a car accident, but we're okay.
Right.
If there's bad news or good news. So coming out of that week of just a really bad week, for the guys to perform the way they did and everyone to contribute and make plays and to beat a really, really good Notre Dame team, very experienced Notre Dame team, and to dominate them on both sides of the ball was great. So that's definitely one we'll not forget. So
the notion on the outside, popular notion was old head coach Dabo was complacent, and then it took a phone call on his radio show to shake him out of it and to make him mad. But he was in a bad. He was going Old Testament before that phone call, right?
So there's a lot of Old Testament. Yeah, this is one thing. What great coaches do is they defend their people to the public. Players, coaches, but they hold people accountable behind the scenes. And if you're not holding people accountable, you're not doing your job. So, there's very few games, especially at Clemson. There's very few Sunday Mondays that were enjoyable.
Yeah.
Whether you win or not.
Yeah.
You didn't win by enough, or we're not reaching our full potential, and so there's a lot of Old Testament, after games for sure, and so yeah, the idea that he's just kind of resting on his laurels and sitting back and enjoying, and that we're all, safe, secure, and complacent, is very far from the truth, which is the way it's supposed to be, So yeah,
I have to too. Casual observers look back at the South Carolina game and they're like, "Oh yeah, it was satisfying win, whatever, defense, own things." But within the team, the flu or whatever, you were sick too, right?
I had the flu, yeah.
There were people on IV drips the day of the game and had a separate quarantine bus. Yeah. Can you maybe give a window into that?
Yeah. So it just started to kind of go, you started seeing some guys with masks on a little bit. And, I actually kind of wore a mask maybe Wednesday, Thursday, just in the building because I felt like I had some kind of sickness going on. And then Thursday night was Thanksgiving. Like that, I woke up that night with a fever, and then Friday went in and saw the doc, and I had the flu, and so I went home. No, I did meetings from my office. Did meetings from my office on Friday, and then we went down. Yeah, we went down Friday. There was one of the poor traders drew the short stick, and he had to ride down. We were in the golf bus, and it was me. And I think JP and Tyler Davis and who else was on? Jamal Anderson, I think. There was like 4 or 5 of us. And we all had flu symptoms. We had blankets and flu symptoms, and they drove us down. Friday we go down, and we kind of the team gets off. We're behind the team, and the team gets off and goes in, and then we go straight up to our rooms, and I think I slept basically all night. And then we came down after meals to get some food, and then I was all bundled up, and I went through meetings on Saturday and had some guys helping me kind of communicate to them. And then that game, it was cold too. I stayed outside the locker room. I kind of got my clothes and stayed outside the locker room. That was pretty miserable. But we got the win, which was fun. But I don't feel like, I think hindsight's always 20/20, but it could have been my last Clemson South Carolina game, and so I don't feel like I enjoyed the win as much because I was just trying to kind of stay upright.
Yeah.
And we're in the locker room, and the guys were dancing and all that, and I was just kind of watching it. I couldn't participate, but I was watching it and tried to savor it.
Just curious, we've just talked about 2 games where you going into the game. The Notre Dame game, I think even people in the building were like, I don't know how we're going to win this game because of all the injuries and all that.
Mm-hmm.
As a coach, was your mentality in either of these games, or is it ever like, I don't know how we're going to pull this off? Or I'm just curious to get a window into your mind and what you're thinking going into a game when there's all this sort of adversity and the chips are down.
Yeah. I think you watch film and you're like, man, this is going to be hard. There's some games where you think, all right, we just got to play well. Then there's some games where you're like, man, we got to play close to perfect, and they've got to make mistakes or whatever. And I felt as I watched them that, and I we kind of got back to some basics of like, hey, let's just run inside zone and counter. Like I don't watch fold schemes. I don't pull. They did so much. They're really good and disciplined. Their blitzing and their slants and angles, and so we've got to run the zone. We got to cover these guys up, and I feel like I was a little more forceful that week in some game plan stuff. And you also you got a freshman right guard, you got a first time starter left guard. Like, hey, this is what we know. We got to kind of hang our hat on this, and we got to drill this. And so, yeah, I mean, the day of the game, I'm like, man, we got to play really, really well. But you've got to convey the confidence to your players, and I think as the closer you get to the game, some games. You're kind of putting the finishing touches on the X's and O's, maybe a more complicated game plan by the defense or something. You got to walk through extra stuff. But other weeks it's, hey, man, we know what to do, and you're building their confidence mentally, of like, no, we're going to go out here. And there was a desperation, by some of those guys. They played with a desperation that you hadn't seen out of a few of them that was really neat to see, you want to go out there with the expectation like we're gonna win this game. And then the communication on the sidelines was so good. Like the players were seeing it well. Will Putnam is just an unbelievable leader. He'd been a leader all year, but he was so dialed into that game plan. And they're, sometimes you come to the sideline and the guy, oh no, coach, I didn't do that. I did this. I'm like, well, I thought you did that, but I'm watching 5 of them and it happened fast. Maybe I saw it wrong. And you get on film, you realize the kid lied to you. Yeah. And these guys were dialed in. They were seeing stuff like it was slow motion. Sometimes guys are like, "Oh, we need to run this," and you're like, "That's not going to work." But they were locked into the game plan and knew, "Hey, they're doing this. We can do that." And so, yeah, man, it was just a really fun when Phil Maffa popped that big run, right into that free safety blitz, and we picked it up, and he popped it. That was as good as it gets.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I love touchdown catches and that stuff, but man. When you run the ball under pressure and you pick it up and you pop a big run, the way Phil, I mean, I'd always thought, like, if Phil Maffa got 20, 25 touches a game, I mean, he's that kind of back that's going to get better as the game goes on, and hopefully this year, Ship's a great player. You got to both those guys on the field, but as Maffa being the guy, and I think, shout out to him, just the patience that he's shown, and a lot of guys would have jumped ship, and gone somewhere else to be the guy. But he's just so humble. I just felt like, man, if we get this kid 25, 30 touches this game, he's going to have a big day. And he's just a punishing runner. And he's a big, fluid athlete that people don't realize. So I always feel good with Phil having the ball, And so I just thought and then we made some plays downfield and then defense gave up a couple runs. I think that first drive, you talk about you really like on the sideline, you're fixing things, and then they had a long drive, and so then you had time to kind of watch it. And they went all the way. I think they went all the way down the field and scored. It made it look easy on that first one. I was like, oh man, this is going to be a tough game. And then the defense stoned them, after that. So that was fun because it wasn't just that week. It was a whole year. I mean, we got physically dominated by Notre Dame up there in Notre Dame, and so it was a payback game. And when you play Notre Dame, it's going to be a physical on both lines of scrimmage. And that left tackle, Joe Alt, they had is as pretty an offensive line as you'll ever see, And so, it's going to be one of those games. And so to beat them at their own game, I think, was very satisfying.
Upstate foodies, want to take a moment to talk to you about our favorite taco spot, Willie Taco. 5 locations across the upstate. This award-winning team has been serving up fresh taco fusion for a solid decade now. The chefs at Willie Taco utilize the freshest, most creative, and sometimes unexpected ingredients in their kitchens. Come see why Southern Living, Garden and Gun, and Food and Wine Magazine are raving about Willie Taco and their signature offerings, such as their Southern Tide, crispy avocado, Nashville hot chicken tacos, literally flavors you will not find anywhere else, folks. And don't forget about the cocktails. Super fresh margaritas, ice cold cerveza, and over 80 tequilas served up daily from behind the bar. So don't wait, folks. Your Willie Taco Familia is ready to serve you up their twist on funky, fresh fusion. It's the Willie way. Another loyal supporter of the Dubcast is Blackacre Law Firm in Greenville, a subsidiary of Parham Smith and Archenhold. Blackacre helps South Carolina residents achieve their dreams of home ownership by providing experienced, professional representation for real estate closings. Attention to detail is crucial in real estate law, Blackacre is committed to making sure nothing gets by them preparing residential or commercial closings. Blackacre also offers estate planning services for their clients in the Greenville area. Find out more about Blackacre at 864-326-3507. Want to share a quick word about Founders Federal Credit Union? If you've been to a sporting event in Clemson, you've probably heard about Founders already. They are the official credit union partner of the Clemson Tigers. In addition to that, all Clemson faculty, staff, and students are eligible for membership as well as IPTAY members. Its office is located beside the Walmart Neighborhood Market on Old Greenville Highway in Clemson. For more information, go to foundersfcu.com. Is there anything I've missed? Anything we haven't covered that you want to talk about?
Yeah, who are you voting for? No, I'm kidding. No, man. I appreciate the opportunity. And
I'm voting for Robert Halfacre for mayor.
There you go. Yeah. Politics. That's another thing. But no, man. I appreciate the opportunity. Appreciate your coverage of Clemson. And I do have one question. Did you have a family member who was a professor at Clemson, or your wife's family member?
I had a family member. My uncle. He's deceased. His name was Bill Kuhn.
Yeah,
he was the English.
Okay.
Yeah, English. I guess he was the dean.
That's what Margaret asked me. Margaret said, but at the time, she said, ask Larry about this. She said, because I remember having him, and he said his nephew, he said his uncle, nephew was a sports writer. Yep. But you weren't here at the time, where you were at a smaller.
Let's see, when was Margaret?
We graduated in 05 to 09.
Well, I was here. I worked for the Charleston Post and Courier, but
that's
lived
what it
here.
Was. I think you said Charleston Post.
Yeah, from 04 to 08.
Yeah.
And then I shifted over to Tiger Illustrated in October of 08.
So, I mean, man, like what you guys do, it's a different kind of grind. It's a lot of work to get to where you are.
I mean, it is, but it's not
fun.
Not like
fun.
coaching.
Yeah, but it's, not everyone makes it.
Right. I mean, and that's the thing. That's the difference between, me and a coach is I have some say over, hey, I like it here.
Mm-hmm.
We're gonna stay here until we can't imagine leaving. That's so nothing. Yep. I mean, unless Clemson football shuts down, hopefully never.
Yeah, I don't think that
we're gonna be we're gonna be here. So it's been almost it has been an honor just to have a window into a Hall of Fame coach and an amazing story. Going from a receivers coach who no one gave a chance to then turning it into a powerhouse of multiple national championships and playoff. I mean, you can see my pictures on my wall. They're all the press boxes at the at most of those playoff stadiums, and so I'll never take that for granted. Just being, I mean, I'm not, obviously not. It's totally different from what y'all people in the building do, but it's still I still consider it it's an honor to have been. To have been able to see that progression,
No, it's an honor to be a part of it, and to see where Clemson was when I was a player, with Coach Bowden, and then to be here for the transition with Sweeney. And then, I remember watching Clemson beat LSU in the bowl game and felt like, man, that was getting over the hump, because I felt like when I was a player, we'd play with anybody and we'd lose to a top 10 team in double overtime, and then we'd drop one that we shouldn't have lost, and so we played to the opponent, and so to see Clemson kind of take that next step, and then to be a part of the AC championships, national championships, all that stuff, as a coach has been awesome. So yeah, Clemson's not going anywhere. They're well positioned, but it's been fun on my side of it. I mean, some of the guys like yourself and Paul and some of those guys that interviewed me as a player, in 2009 are still doing it, and so that's kind of part of what makes Clemson special.
I have to share this. You'll like this. In 2008, when Bowden was out and Dabo was in, of course that was Georgia Tech week, and I'm not a historian of the last 20 years, but I do consider myself pretty knowledgeable on sort of the important pivot points and what if this happened and that would have happened, and Dabo could have taken a job with Nick Saban, or I guess he was interviewing at UAB and really wanted that job that went to Neil Callaway. Anyway, one of the pivot points that I had never considered that somebody pointed out to me a couple months ago, that week, Dabo stuck with Willie Korn, the promotion of Willie Korn to starting quarterback. Bowden had made that decision after the Wake game. Yeah. Well, Cullen, he had his shoulders, I think both of them, at least one of them needed surgery. He was banged up, and he was going to just shut it down and have surgery, then rehab, and then get ready for the draft. Well, Dabo told his Cullen's dad, we got to have him. Like Dabo resisted, whereas I think a lot of coaches probably would have said, okay, fair enough.
Yeah.
But if Cullen doesn't, if Cullen shuts it down, Corn got hurt against Georgia Tech
in the first series or something like that.
Early. I think he might have lasted like 4 series, but the other options were Michael Wade and a freshman Kyle Parker. So there's no freaking way y'all win 4 games.
And he's not getting the job.
Yeah. So pretty wild.
No, that's amazing. Cullen's a friend of mine, and I thought that was a tough year. I mean, going into 2008 and preseason ranked number 9, and Thunder and Lightning and all the skill players we had. And I think we had 2 linemen get hurt in the first game, and our depth struggled, and so it was I mean, kind of goes back to this. That if the portals, I mean, like that, Cullen could have shut it down. I think it's a testament to Cullen's buying in, and like if you've ever gotten benched before, for a guy, and his part of it is the crowd always wants the next best thing, right? And so Cullen had won a lot of football games here. Willie was a highly recruited guy. I'm still friends with Willie. He's killing it in the coaching world and at Liberty. And, he deserved an opportunity. That's fine. But I think a lot of guys would have shut it down, and a testament to Cullen of just, him putting the team above himself. And Cullen got the raw end of the deal in this, I think, kind of his comment about Tommy, I think got taken out of context, the way that went down. He kind of got blacklisted. But so – for him to stay is what I'm saying. I'm rambling, but for him to stay, be committed to the team, and then Willie got hurt his shoulder and also didn't shut it down. He needed surgery, but he waited till the end of the season, which affected his off season, and so there's so many stories like that of just unselfishness, and that's the beauty of a team sport, that it's not about one person, one coach. It's not about Dabo Swinney. It's not about position coaches. It's about Clemson, and I think that's what's. Man, there's all kinds of those stories, and so, I haven't thought about that context. I mean, that year I just got married too, and then I got called for holding, of course, in that game. You weren't going to bring it up, but I will. It was a bad call, but like I was just trying to, and after that game, I was devastated because I felt like I let the whole team down, and I remember Brad Scott calling me. I'll never forget this. I was. Kind of with my family afterwards. It must have been a noon kickoff or 3 o'clock because I was hanging out with my family and just moping around. And Brad Scott called me and said he watched the film. That wasn't a hold, and but it didn't change the fact of the game. And so you as a player, you got to learn to kind of deal with that. You got to, what is true. You're getting coached hard, or you're hearing stuff in the media, whatever. What is true that I need to apply and change. And then what's not true that I need to roll off me like water off a duck's back. I think that's the art as a player. That's what mental toughness is. That's what mental toughness is as a coach. And you've it's like that in arguments with your wife, right, or whatever. I mean, sometimes you say stuff that you don't really mean, and you gotta process it and what's true, what's not. So, football is a great teacher in that way.
If you bring up Brad Scott, I have to mention a story that involves you. When were you a freshman?
05.
05.
Yeah.
So this was 04, 05, I guess maybe after you signed, before you signed. There was a rumor going around that NC State was interested in him, and they were.
Yeah, yeah.
But the other part of that was the assumption that he was interested in them, which he was not. Like, he was not going to go work for Chuck Amato.
Yeah.
I actually wrote that there was interest. I sort of insinuated there was interest on his side.
Yeah.
And he was so furious with me, probably for years.
Yeah.
But he said that Thomas Austin's dad threw that in my face when I walked in his house on a visit or something, and that's what he was most pissed about.
This is a great story. If you got a few more minutes, yeah. This is a great story. No, my dad did. So, Lou Holtz was the head coach of South Carolina till 04, right? The brawl happened. That was his last year. And I was committed that, at that time, I think 7 or 8 of the best, highest ranked in-state kids were committed to Clemson. And then we had a kid, maybe A.J. Green a kid going to Georgia, a kid, Bird, I think his name, from Northwestern, maybe going to Florida State. Mm-hmm. The rest of us were going, and then Mike Davis. Mike went to South Carolina. The rest, everyone else going to Clemson. So, I'm leaving. Spurrier takes over as the head coach in December, and I'm leaving wrestling practice, and he calls. My dad calls me. He says, "Hey, you had a missed call from Steve Spurrier." I was like, "What?" Wow. My uncle David is a huge Gator fan. Been a Gator fan. And, I just got a cell phone, by the way, senior year of high school.
BlackBerry or a flip?
No, it was definitely a flip. This is before BlackBerry. I got it in college. It was a big deal. I could play Snake on it, brick breaker. So, I was fully locked into Clemson. But when Steve Spurrier calls you, you're like, this is kind of interesting, and so he's like, hey, he's going to call back at X, because he didn't have my cell number. He had to call the house. And this is what made Brad Scott so great, was Brad would call, and my younger sister, Becca, she's 4 years younger, Brad would call and she would pick up the phone. Hey, Becca, who's been calling this week? What's going on? How's it? And Rick Stockstill was my recruiter at South Carolina. And the day I committed, I called Coach Stock, and Robbie recruited me at Vanderbilt. I called Stock and said, "Hey, Coach, thanks so much for everything you did, but I'm committed to Clemson." And he said, "Hey, thanks for calling me. No worries. Like, just know your offer's still valid. If anything changes, just let me know. If it's okay with you, I'll just continue to call you once a week and just stay in touch." And he'd come by the high school and some of those things. So I said, "Yeah, sure, Coach, no problem." So I kept a good relationship with Stock still the whole time. To his credit, to Brad's credit, because they'd both been at the other schools. Yeah. Neither one of them ever said a negative word about the other school. There was no negative recruiting. So I'm fully committed to Clemson. Steve Spurrier calls the house. I have a conversation with Coach Spurrier, and I think we had one conversation with him, maybe two, and then it was in-home visit time. So Brad Scott comes to do in-home visit, and they had plenty of battles at Florida State.
Oh yeah,
Brad was at Florida State.
Yes.
And so, Coach Scott said, "Hey, sorry, Coach Bowden couldn't be here, but he's, right at 7:00, be ready. He's going to call the house. He's going to call you at 7:00. Well, sure enough, we're eating dinner at 7:00. The phone rings, and I go to pick it up, and it's Steve Spurrier. and I pick it up and say, "Hey, Coach." And he's like, "How'd you know I was calling you?" I was like, "Oh, hey, Coach Spurrier." And I saw like a shift in Coach Scott's demeanor. Man. Right? He's like, So I leave the room. I go have a conversation, and then I come back, and he says, "Hey, just so you know, like, Spurrier's been calling all of our recruits trying to flip guys." He said, "Hey, there's nothing wrong with that, but if you're interested, you need to tell me that. But if you're not interested, you need to tell him you're not interested, and he needs to quit calling you." And that's kind of the unspoken rule of recruiting: is a kid shows you initiative, calls you, he's not interested, pull back. So I said, "Okay, Coach, he'll call me. I'll talk to him next week, and I'll tell him that." He's like, "Just so you know, he's been pulling people. He's like, if you want to be, one of the leaders of this class, you want to be a bell cow on the offensive line, like, you've got to set the tone, because other guys or people are reading stuff."
Yep.
He didn't name you, but people are reading stuff online, and if they think there's doubt in one guy, it could start to erode the cohesion of this recruiting class. Because at that time, there was no, like they are now, guys are texting each other, and like the classes are know each other so well before they get there. I met Rendrick and Josh Miller at Barry Humphreys at games, but I didn't really know them well. But so he was like, if you're firm to Clemson, you need to tell Coach that, and he's going to respect that. So next week he calls, and I tell him that, he said, "Okay, all right. The next week he calls me again, and I'm at church, and Coach Spurrier's like, "Well, I just want, I think my mom said, 'Well, hey, Coach, I thought Thomas told you, he's not interested.'" "Okay, all right, well, Brad Scott calls at some point in the timeline and says, "Hey, just so you know, there's a rumor." And in my mind, it was Florida State, but maybe it was NC State.
Yeah.
I thought it was going back to Florida State, but he said, "Hey, just so you know, there's a rumor that I'm going to go to this school. And people trying to get that out there." And he said, "But I just want you to know, Miss Darrell says if I go somewhere, she ain't going with me, because she's building a house right now, and she ain't leaving. I just want you to hear that from me." "Okay, Coach, yeah, man." And so the next week, Spurrier calls back. It was like on Wednesday night or something. I was at church, and he says, "Hey, Thomas, your mom said, no, he's not. I thought he's told you he's fully committed to Clemson." And he goes, "Well, My mom loved Brad Scott. You know, that's what Brad Scott. My dad always said he could sell ice to an Eskimo, but he got the mamas, you know, and he was good. And so he says, well, you know, okay, well, you know, there's a rumor, you know, that Brad Scott is maybe going to leave, and I just, you know, that might affect. He said, no, that's not true. You know, Coach Scott called us, you know, and said, you know. First of all, he says, well, you know, when the first time I talked to Thomas, he sounded interested, and now he's not. I just want to make sure Clemson, you know, didn't threaten to pull his scholarship or something. She said, oh, no, Clemson, we're fine. Clemson wouldn't do that. Okay, all right, well, you know. And then he says, well, you know, rumors Brad Scott's leaving. Mom said, no, that's not happening. He actually called us yesterday and told us he's not. He goes, well, you know that Brad Scott, you just never can be too careful. And when he said that, my mom went nuts on Spurrier. Nuts. Let me tell you one thing. This is the last time you're ever going to call this household. I don't care how much money you make. My son is never going to play for you. I'm glad he's going to go play for Clemson. I hope he beats you every year. Like, she's digging in. Like, don't ever call, you know. And my brother, who's 2 years younger, is like in the background. Like, he wants to get recruited. He's like, no, cut it off. No, stop, you know. And she's just giving it to Spur. He's okay, all right. He can't get off the phone fast enough, you know. He was okay, thank you. Have a great day. All right. You know, and gets off the phone. Well, the next week, they're at some kind of banquet at the South Carolina Stadium, and Spurrier walks up to Brad. He goes, "I'll tell you one thing. You sure do got that mama from Camden snowed in. I ain't talking to her anymore."
That is fantastic.
And Brad Scott's like, "Oh yeah, that's right." You know, and they were good friends. You know, and they knew how to they recruited against each other. There was no ill will in any of it. But you know, my mom blasted Spur. You want her on your good side. You don't want her on your bad side. So that's funny you said that, because I didn't know it was your fault. Obviously, I guess you created the whole.
Well, I wasn't the only one who wrote it. Like, and in fact, I was writing for the Post and Courier at the time, and my story said NC State interested in Scott.
Yeah.
And then the headline writer, we don't write the headlines.
Yeah.
Or didn't at that time. And then the headline writer said, Scott interested in NC State. And that threw him.
Yeah.
He was just like, I never worked for a motto. And, you know. Anyway.
Well, you know, and that matters. And I don't think people know that sometimes. Like, I know, you know, sometimes if a fan base is talking negative about a coach or player on Twitter, like, recruits see that stuff. It matters. You know, if they're dogging people or questioning guys, you know, like it gets back to people. Other fan bases will screenshot that and send it to kids, you know. And so, you know, and there's a fine line, right? Because this journalism, you gotta number one, you gotta chase down every lead, whether it's true or not. And then number two, like, you know, you gotta grab people's attention, you know, with the headlines and stuff. So,
that did teach me. I was young, and at the time, you know, I mean, having this guy mad at me for years, it's like, you know, that was a fundamental lesson for me. Like, you damn well better make sure it's right. Not 98%, not 99%, 100%. Like, and so my rule for years has been, if I write this, am I going to be able to sleep tonight? Mm-hmm. You know, whether it's about somebody going, you know, being interested in this or that, and if the answer is no, then I'm going to hold off.
No doubt. So, no, and I mean, I think, and that's you know, there's people involved, you know, and that's the tough thing is you gotta write stories, but you know, it's you know, not to lose sight of, like, it affects people, and I can't imagine now in this day and age with kids. My kids aren't on phones yet, but like when coaches' kids start having access to Twitter and all that, they see that stuff, and it was, you know, that was one of the things that you had to battle as a coach, is you trying to get the kids to block out that noise and whatever's saying on Twitter, whatever people are saying about you or coaches, whatever, like, we need to, here's what we know is true, you know. And I think that's one thing Sweeney did well was, and that's one I think fans and media probably got frustrated with him always painting an optimistic picture. You're talking about the turnovers and if these things change, but those were things that he was telling himself and the staff and the players to get the guys to continue to believe and block out that outside noise, because it's more and more difficult, you know, than ever before to block that out and focus on what's true.
Thomas, we're going to have to do this again, because this has been a thrill.
Hey, man, I enjoyed it. Thank you.
I can't express my appreciation enough for you talking about some very personal stuff and family stuff. I think it's I think it's enlightening, and I think people will learn a lot more about the human side of this. So, a lot of listeners were going to appreciate it.
Well, you might have to edit it because I don't know if anyone's going to listen to the length.
I guarantee you they will.
I guarantee appreciate you, man. Thank you.
Thank you. I got a feeling a lot of people out there listened to the very end. Simply great stuff from Thomas Austin, and all the best to him in his future endeavors. Got a feeling he's going to be really successful in whatever he ends up doing. Thanks so much for our sponsors for being such a part of this for so long. And of course, thanks to all you for hitting that play button every week. Cheers.